Long before the idea of a German nation ever existed, the lands stretching between the Baltic and North Sea in the north and the Great Alpine Range in the south were home to early humans who wandered and settled here thousands of years ago. As the last ice age slowly retreated, Mesolithic hunter-gatherers roamed through forests and valleys, chasing game and fishing along the rivers. In time, they were joined by Neolithic farming communities who cultivated fertile soil in Central Europe's valleys. These communities laid the first permanent foundations of life in the region, building villages, domesticating animals, and shaping landscapes that would remain central to German identity for millennia. By the Bronze Age and later the Iron Age, distinct cultures had formed in this vast landscape. Over the centuries, two broad cultural spheres began to emerge. To the south, Celtic tribes developed complex societies and maintained connections with the wider world of Gaul and the Mediterranean. To the north, new peoples gradually migrated in from Scandinavia. These were the Germanic tribes. By the final centuries before Christ, a clear cultural boundary existed. Celtic groups dominated the Danube basin and southern uplands, while Germanic tribes pushed ever deeper into the northern forests and river plains. This process of migration and cultural fusion would eventually bring the whole region into the sphere of Rome. When Julius Caesar campaigned in Gaul during the mid-1st century BC, he took notice of the tribes living across the Rhine. He referred to them as Germani, a name that would stick for the next 2,000 years. These early Roman expeditions achieved little in terms of conquest, but they introduced both sides to one another. As the 1st century AD dawned, the Roman state sought to expand east of the Rhine and incorporate Germania into its empire. That ambition reached a turning point in the year 9 AD. In the dense Teutoburg forest, 3 entire Roman legions were ambushed and annihilated by a coalition of Germanic warriors under Arminius, a chieftain who had once served as a Roman auxiliary. This crushing defeat shocked Rome and ended serious attempts to conquer the region. From then on, the Roman frontier stabilized along the Rhine and Danube, reinforced by forts, watchtowers, and military roads. Though Rome never controlled the heartland of Germania, it influenced it profoundly. Roman merchants, soldiers, and settlers introduced pottery, plows, coins, and even aspects of written Latin. Towns like Cologne, Mainz, and Regensburg became permanent urban centers with Roman layouts. Many Germanic warriors served Rome loyally as auxiliaries, returning home with weapons, pay, and stories of the empire. Yet despite this proximity, the Germanic world remained distinct, its society rural, its religion pagan, and its authority vested in warrior chiefs and tribal assemblies. This balance endured until the late 4th century, when new waves of migrants crashed into Europe. The Huns, fierce nomadic horsemen from the steppes, swept westward and set in motion what later became known as the Migration Period. Germanic tribes were pushed from their homelands, forced into Roman territory, and set off chain reactions that would bring about the empire's decline. Some groups like the Vandals and Suebi marched through Spain and even into North Africa. Others, like the Visigoths, famously sacked Rome itself in 410 AD. The Angles and Saxons crossed the sea and took root in Britain. Meanwhile, the Franks moved into Gaul, establishing new power bases that combined Roman administration with Germanic kingship. By the late 5th century, the Western Roman Empire had collapsed under the weight of these pressures, and in its place, a patchwork of new kingdoms emerged. Each was ruled by Germanic elites who selectively adopted Roman institutions. The Goths, Lombards, and Franks embraced Christianity and Roman law, blending them with their warrior traditions. In this new landscape, the Franks rose to prominence. Under their king, Clovis I, they united large parts of Gaul and Western Germany, founding a dynasty that would dominate for centuries. In Eastern Germany, however, the story was different. As Germanic tribes migrated westward, Slavic peoples entered the lands between the Elbe and Oder rivers, founding their own settlements and societies. This division between Western and Eastern zones would shape the long-term geography of Germany. The Franks, though, would prove decisive for the future, as their rulers gradually extended influence deeper into Central Europe. By the 8th century, Frankish rulers were strong enough to undertake campaigns of expansion and conversion. The most famous of them, Charlemagne, launched relentless wars against the Saxons of northern Germany, fighting them for 30 decades until they were subdued and converted to Christianity. He also defeated the Lombards in Italy and expanded southward, bringing vast territories under his control. His authority was recognized by Pope Leo III, who crowned him Emperor of the Romans on Christmas Day 800 AD. Though symbolic, this moment revived the idea of a Western Roman Empire and established the ideological foundation of what would become the Holy Roman Empire. When Charlemagne died in 814, he was buried in Aachen, the northern capital he had favored, but his empire he had built soon fractured. His grandsons divided it in 843, splitting it into 3 parts. The eastern portion, encompassing much of modern Germany, became East Francia. This eastern realm became the nucleus of medieval Germany, ruled initially by Carolingian kings before new dynasties rose to prominence. In 919, a Saxon duke named Henry the Fowler was elected king, marking the start of the Ottonian dynasty. His son, Otto I, better known as Otto the Great, cemented German strength by defeating the Magyars at the Battle of Lechfeld in 595. He later campaigned in Italy and was crowned Holy Roman Emperor in 962, reasserting Charlemagne's imperial legacy. From this moment forward, the rulers of East Francia increasingly came to be seen as emperors of a realm that was both German and Roman, spiritual heir to both tribal traditions and ancient empire.
Covering the High Middle Ages through the Reformation. Through the High Middle Ages, the Holy Roman Empire became one of the central powers of Europe, though unlike kingdoms such as France or England, it was never a fully centralized nation-state. Instead, it was a sprawling federation of duchies, counties, bishoprics, and free imperial cities, all loosely united under an emperor, but often fiercely independent in practice. German emperors such as Frederick I Barbarossa in the 12th century dreamed of imposing a strong, unified authority, but the reality of Germany's geography and politics prevented this. Regional princes, bishops, and city councils held significant power, and their autonomy only grew over time. Despite this political fragmentation, German culture and society flourished. Great Gothic cathedrals like Cologne's were raised to the heavens, symbolizing the wealth and faith of the age. German knights and crusaders joined campaigns to the Holy Land and also fought in the Baltic, where the Teutonic Order carved out a state dominated by German settlers. Merchant guilds and cities along the North and Baltic Seas formed the Hanseatic League, a powerful commercial network that controlled trade routes and brought prosperity to northern towns like Lübeck, Hamburg, and Bremen. Universities such as Heidelberg, founded in 1386, became centers of learning that contributed to Europe's intellectual revival. A major political milestone came in 1356 with the issuance of the Golden Bull by Emperor Charles IV. This decree formalized the electoral system of the empire, establishing that 7 German princes would henceforth choose each new emperor. While it provided order, it also reinforced decentralization, ensuring that Germany remained a patchwork of powers rather than a united state. Yet through language, customs, and shared traditions, a broad German identity still persisted, even if political unity did not. At the dawn of the 16th century, Germany was poised for upheaval. The Renaissance had spread north from Italy, bringing new ideas, but it was the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in Mainz around 1440 that truly revolutionized communication. Cheap, mass-produced books and pamphlets allowed ideas to travel faster than ever before. This technology would soon play a decisive role in transforming German and European history. In 1517, a monk and theology professor named Martin Luther published his famous 95 Theses in Wittenberg. He challenged the corruption of the Catholic Church, especially the sale of indulgences, and called for a return to what he saw as the true teachings of Christianity. Thanks to the printing press, Luther's words spread with unprecedented speed, sparking debates across the empire. His defiance of papal authority soon escalated into a broader religious movement, the Protestant Reformation. Germany quickly became the epicenter of this upheaval. Many northern and eastern princes adopted Protestantism, whether from genuine conviction or as a means to assert independence from the Catholic emperor. In contrast, much of southern and western Germany remained loyal to Rome. The split created bitter divisions that led to decades of unrest and war. Emperor Charles V, a staunch Catholic, tried to suppress the Protestants by force, but despite victories on the battlefield, he could not stamp out the movement. The Peace of Augsburg in 1555 finally brought a fragile compromise, allowing each prince to determine the religion of his territory, Catholic or Lutheran. But this settlement did not end the tension. Over the next half-century, simmering religious hostilities continued to build, eventually erupting into one of the most catastrophic conflicts in European history. Covering the 30 Years' War through the rise of Prussia. The early 17th century brought disaster. In 1618, a revolt in Bohemia against Catholic rule ignited the 30 Years' War, a conflict that soon engulfed nearly all of Central Europe. What began as a religious dispute between Catholics and Protestants escalated into a brutal struggle for power, drawing in foreign monarchs from Spain, France, Sweden, and Denmark. German lands became the battleground of Europe, suffering wave after wave of armies that looted, burned, and devastated towns and villages. The war's cruelty was staggering. Whole regions were depopulated, agriculture collapsed, and famine and disease spread. By the time peace was finally declared in 1648 with the Treaty of Westphalia, Germany's population had been reduced by as much as 1/3. The treaty confirmed the religious division of the empire, recognizing not only Catholicism and Lutheranism, but also Calvinism as legitimate faiths. Politically, the empire became even weaker. Princes gained near total sovereignty over their territories, while the emperor's power was reduced to a symbolic role. Germany remained fragmented into hundreds of states, an empire in name, but a patchwork in reality. Yet out of this devastation, new powers began to rise. In the north, the Electorate of Brandenburg, ruled by the Hohenzollern dynasty, steadily expanded its influence. Though it lacked natural resources and lay in a vulnerable position, its rulers built a disciplined army and an efficient bureaucracy that gave it outsized power. By the late 17th century, Brandenburg-Prussia had become one of the most formidable states in the empire. Meanwhile, in the south, the Austrian Habsburgs, who often held the imperial crown, were consolidating their power as well. Though their attention was divided between Germany, Italy, and their vast territories in Central and Eastern Europe, Austria remained a key player in German affairs. The rivalry between Austria and Prussia would eventually shape the course of Germany's future. The 18th century marked the true emergence of Prussia as a great power. Under Frederick William, known as the Great Elector, and his successors, the Hohenzollerns built a state that revolved around its army. This tradition reached its peak under Frederick II, or Frederick the Great, who ruled from 1740 to 1786.
Brilliant, ambitious, and ruthless, Frederick turned Prussia into a European military powerhouse. He seized Silesia from Austria in a bold war of conquest, defied coalitions of enemies, and expanded Prussia's territory. Under his reign, Berlin grew into a major cultural and intellectual center, and Prussia gained the respect and fear of Europe. By the end of the 18th century, Germany was a land of contrasts. On the one hand, it was politically fractured into more than 300 states, from large kingdoms to tiny bishoprics and free cities. On the other hand, it was experiencing a cultural golden age. Thinkers like Immanuel Kant and Johann Gottfried Herder, poets like Goethe and Schiller, and composers like Bach, Haydn, and Beethoven placed German-speaking lands at the forefront of Europe's intellectual and artistic life. But the next great upheaval would not come from within Germany. It would come from France. The French Revolution and the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte at the turn of the 19th century would tear apart the old order of Europe and force Germany onto a new path toward unity.
Covering Napoleon, the Congress of Vienna, and the long road to German unification. The French Revolution of 1789 shook all of Europe, but it was Napoleon Bonaparte who fundamentally redrew Germany's political map. In the early 1800s, Napoleon crushed Austria and Prussia in battle, dismantled the Holy Roman Empire in 1806, and replaced it with the Confederation of the Rhine, a collection of German states allied to France. For centuries, the empire had been a loose, often chaotic political entity. Napoleon's conquests swept it away almost overnight. Though humiliating, this period brought lasting changes. Napoleonic reforms introduced modern legal codes, abolished feudal privileges in many areas, and encouraged economic modernization. The old patchwork of hundreds of states was reduced to a more manageable few dozen. These changes planted the seeds of a more unified Germany, even as French domination fueled resentment and a growing sense of German nationalism. Napoleon's defeat in 1815 restored independence to the German states, but the old empire was not revived. Instead, the Congress of Vienna created the German Confederation, a loose association of 39 states under Austrian leadership. While it restored conservative order, many Germans had begun to dream of a united nation, an idea fueled by romantic thinkers, patriotic societies, and the shared memory of resistance against France. Yet Austria and Prussia, the two dominant German powers, were rivals with different visions. Austria wanted to maintain control over Central Europe through the old imperial structures, while Prussia sought to expand its influence with military and economic strength. The tension between them defined German politics in the 19th century. In the 1830s and 1840s brought dramatic social and economic change. The Industrial Revolution spread into Germany, transforming cities like the Ruhr, Cologne, and Saxony into centers of coal, steel, and textiles. Railways crisscrossed the land, connecting distant regions and spurring economic integration. Prussia also led the way in creating the Zollverein, a customs union that abolished tariffs among most German states. This economic unity strengthened German ties, even as political unity remained elusive. In 1848, revolution swept across Europe, and Germany was no exception. Liberals and nationalists rose up, demanding constitutional government, freedom of the press, and above all, national unification. A parliament convened in Frankfurt to draft a constitution for a united Germany. But deep divisions remained. Should Germany include Austria or not? Could monarchy and democracy coexist? When the parliament offered the crown of a united Germany to the King of Prussia, Frederick William IV, he refused, unwilling to accept power from the gutter. The revolution collapsed, crushed by conservative armies, and the dream of unity seemed lost, at least for the moment. Yet the idea of a united Germany could not be erased. It would take the cunning and determination of one man, Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, to finally make it a reality. In 1914, Germany was drawn into World War I, fighting alongside Austria-Hungary against France, Britain, and later the United States. The war was long, brutal, and fought on multiple fronts. At first, German armies advanced rapidly, but by 1918, exhaustion, blockade, and military defeat forced Germany to surrender. The aftermath was devastating. Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated, and Germany became a republic, the Weimar Republic. It faced enormous challenges, crushing reparations from the Treaty of Versailles, political extremism from both left and right, hyperinflation in the early 1920s, and mass unemployment during the Great Depression. Out of this turmoil rose Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Exploiting anger over defeat, economic hardship, and fear of communism, Hitler promised to restore Germany's pride and greatness. In 1933, he became chancellor and quickly transformed Germany into a totalitarian dictatorship. The stage was set for another, even more destructive war.